Huh? Om Shri Sai Ram. My humble namaskarams to my revered Guru, Dr. Padma Subramaniam. Thank you, Paduka, for having given me an opportunity to be part of the Thanjavur Utsavam. I thank the IGNCA, the ASI, and South Zone Cultural Center for having invited me to present a paper on murals of 11th century, an evolution from Ajanta to Thanjavur. Kalanam pratamam chitram, dharma artha kama mokshadam, mangalya pradam dotat grihe, yatra pratishtitam. The finest of all arts is Chitrakala. It bestows the four purusharthas of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha and liberates the mind of an individual from his limited confines. Wherever it is created, it brings auspiciousness and beauty. A painting is like a balm that assuages anxiety, enhances hope for future well-being, gives untainted joy, expels the evils of bad dreams, and pleases the gods enshrined therein. These are some gems from the Chitra Sutra chapter of Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. The written manuscript of this text is ascribed to 6th century CE, placing it in the golden age of the Guptas, who encouraged oral traditional knowledge to be codified as written texts. Though the authorship is unknown, the entire text is presented as a conversation between sage Markandeya and King Vajra, who seeks knowledge about image making, Shilpakala. The sage propounds thus: the entire universe should be understood as the modification, Vikriti, of the formless, Prakriti. The worship and meditation of the Supreme is possible for an ordinary being only when the formless is endowed with a form, and when that form is full of significance. The best worship of the Supreme is, of course, contemplation of the formless with eyes closed, all senses subdued in meditation. He continues to explain how life and the world around us is an inspiration for all activities, as art itself is Lokanukaranam. Vishnu Dharmottara is perhaps the oldest known treatise on the art of sculpture and painting. That this knowledge existed in the oral tradition, handed down from generation to generation even before it was scripted, can be seen in the paintings belonging to the earlier centuries, adhering to these tenets like the Bagh and the Ajanta painting. You can notice how the faces are drawn following the proper rules to demarcate the position of the eyes, the eyebrows, nose, ears, and lips. This is a very special system that is given in the Shastra. Almost all the jewelry have the effect of the three-dimensional jewels on the body. The art of painting has been a much cherished pastime and profession in India from very ancient times. The extant architectural, iconographic, and literary evidences prove this beyond doubt. Our earliest sources of this revelation are the ancient rock caverns with pictorial decorations on the interior walls. You can see they begin with line drawings, then we have monotones which go on to become the most sophisticated, colorful panels. Next, the most characteristic feature of Indian art has been its remarkable unity and consistency in its execution of individual figures as well as complete panels of stories. Though there were regional variations and individual styles, it is amazing to note that the works produced in diverse geographical and cultural regions shared certain common values, concepts, and technique. Here you can see the very popular story of Ravana shaking Mount Kailas. The 8th century sculpted panel, the entire, Ellora, the entire temple is sculpted from rock. And you can see Ravana with his 10 heads and 20 arms, many of them mutilated now, the rishis, and Shiva and the frightened Parvati. In the mural that was discovered in the interior wall of the interior circumambulatory of the Brihadishwara temple, we have the same theme. If you can see Ravana with his 10 heads, but you can see an evolution in representing the 20 arms. They become more stylized because for them the representation of the 20 arms was very important. And so we have the 20 arms represented in a very stylized manner. Then we have the rishis and the beauty of Shiva and Parvati, where Shiva's foot, the big toe, is pressing down the mountain. It's a beautiful, the two are comparative completely in their concept and the story, but represented very differently. And all these varied manifestations were inspired by a common general principle, which very strongly reveals the fact that they were created by painters well versed in a common code of knowledge laid down in a Shastra. It would be interesting to note that a painting from Kailashnath temple here, Kanchipuram, reveals a striking similarity to the Padmapani of Ajanta, especially in the Asamyukta Hasta Katakamukha, which can be seen in its lifelike perfection in the Chola bronze, the third one. Here I would like to share something, the difference between Natya Shastra and Abhinay Darpana, which is being followed by everybody. In the Natya Shastra, in the Asamyukta Abhinaya Hasta, for Kataka Mukha, when from Kapitta, when the two fingers, the little finger and the ring finger are released, then it says there should be a slight natam. That is, it is to be bent. Can you notice that all the three are like that? There is a continuity of the Natya Shastra technique. Whereas the later work, that itself shows that Abhinay Darpana is much later, which we all follow. And that is very clearly is a development from Mushti to Shikhara to Kapitta and Katakamukha, where it only talks about Prasrita. The fingers are stretched out, but there is no bending. So here is a continuity of a technique. The 11th century can be considered the golden period of the imperial Cholas. Though vestiges of murals are found in the earlier temples of Narthamalai and Malayadipatti and others, it is the Periyakoil in Thanjavur that contains murals revealing a very sophisticated and evolved art of painting in the inner Pradakshinapada of the Vimana. I won't go into details as we are running against time. The more important one is the Thanjavur painting. In 1930, Professor S.K. Govindasamy of Annamalai University, while inspecting the walls of the 6-foot wide dim-lit ambulatory around the sanctum of the Brihadishwara, noticed that the painted surfaces on the walls on either side of the ambulatory were peeling in places, which, on close examination, revealed an older system of painting. A very, very beautiful panels were revealed. These were identified as belonging to Rajaraja's period, contemporaneous with the building of the temple itself. The Nayak rulers, just hold on, the Nayak rulers who took over Thanjavur from the Cholas had covered the earlier paintings with newer ones. The Department of Archaeology was quick to preserve both the period paintings by a remarkable scientific conservation process. Shri S. Paramashivan, chemical curator, was responsible in supervising the cleaning and revealing the excellence of the Chola paintings, and at the same time retaining intact the upper layer on which the Nayak paintings are drawn by reinstalling them on large boards, probably fiberglass, through the de-stucco process. The Chola murals coming to light generated tremendous information about the Puranic stories popular during that period. The huge size of the painting in keeping with Rajaraja's concept, and also that the Natya Shastra was well known and a prevalent text. The dancer performing the Udvrita Karana, the Apsaras shown in the Akashiki Karanas involving the Vrischikau Padau, which means both the feet are turned in air. I mean, they are in a jump, they are in a jumping position or leaping up, which is used for showing Apsaras in flight. Their aharya is in keeping with what is prescribed in the Natya Shastra for Apsaras. The Alida Purusha Sthana to depict the force of Tripurantaka, and the Rasa Drishti of Raudra with red countenance. The facial expressions even of the frightened monkey. All these are thrilling revelation of the prevalence of the oldest treatise of the world, our priceless inheritance, the Natya Shastra, in practice in our Tamil Nadu. The fact that the Vishnu Dharmottara text has its foundation in Natya Shastra is proved beyond doubt by the shlokas in Chitra Sutra that recommend Natya as the best source of painting human figures according to proper proportion and symmetry, Talamana and Pramana. The flexions of the body like Dvibhanga and Tribhanga, you can see that. This is Tribhanga and some Dvibhanga there. The space occupied through sthanas are static positions. The representation of dynamic movement through charis and karanas, you can see here. The hastas or hand gestures giving identity to the characters, you can see that. The mukhaja upangas of the eyes, eyebrows, lips, expression, emotions, which we saw in the previous panel, had to be explicit in order to make the painting come alive with rhythm and emotions. Painting, being a visual art, had to have the strength to evoke the appropriate rasa as soon as we set eyes on it. In order to understand the evolution of art of painting from its early period to the 11th century, it is relevant to view it on the basis of the Shadangas prescribed in the Chitra Sutra. Rupa Bheda Pramanani Bhava Lavanya Yojanam Sadrishyam Varnika Bhanga iti Chitra Shadangakam. Rupa Bheda is variation of form, Pramana is proportion, Bhava is depiction of emotion, Lavanya Yojana is infusion of grace, Sadrishya is likeness, Varnika Bhanga is mixing of colors. Rupa Bheda is the representation of various forms in nature, individually and collectively. We would notice here that every divine episode or royal activity, though having a central figure, is always accompanied by a group. It is not the individual portraiture, but the dramatic element of dynamic activity that becomes the characteristic feature of ancient paintings. We have the Mahajanaka Jataka. Here you can see the king who is pensively looking down, and because he wants to renounce royal life and take on to the Buddhist order. The queen who is bedecked in all royal finery to show him what he is going to leave behind, the luxury of that life. There is so much of activity with all the women at the back, each one having a different stance, different expression of sadness, of pensiveness, of fear whether he would listen or not. And there is another panel which we were not able to put because of lack of space, and it continues to show him watching. He is not watching, but it is a distraction that has been created by the queen. There is a Nritta Mandapa, and there is a solo dancer performing with an entire orchestra of female members playing the four Vadyas mentioned in the Natya Shastra. So we have the Tatavadya, Shushiravadya, Bhandavadya and Ghanavadya all being represented here. And then, of course, there is, the panel continues. The story goes on and on. It's if you go to Ajanta, it's like a whole film roll being exposed like that, but it's so dramatic, full of activity. Actually, okay, we'll go on. But the Thanjavur paintings, the transition is towards portraying a single episode in a panel. The Tripurantaka panel is the most populated, but nowhere to compare with the earlier periods. There are a lot of figures in that, but it is not a continuous story like we saw in Bagh or in Ajanta. During the Nayak period, there are lesser members in the panel depicting an episode. As we can see, the wedding of Shiva and Parvati with the minimum number of figures. And during the Maratha period, it evolved into individual figure portrayal, as you can see a person standing there. The next is Pramana, which represent proportion of not only the individual figure but the concept of showing some figures larger than the others. The Chitra Sutra advocates the value of space and the significance of foreshortening and perspective to create the effect of 3-dimension in 2-dimensional form of painting. Here you can see Buddha almost as tall as his palace, and at the entrance of the palace, fitting into the normal size, are his wife and son. This is to it's another concept of Pramana, where each figure has got its individual Pramana intact. Buddha's head fits properly into the body that he is endowed with, and so are the other figures. In this same, following the same norms, Rajaraja praying at the Chidambaram shrine is shown much larger than his 3 wives. I've just circled that. We come to Bhava, which is the portraying of emotion, which is amply represented in Ajanta and Thanjavur. The pensive Padmapani and the king and fierce Tripurantaka are embodiment of Bhava. Here we have the painting of Mara. We know Appas Mara. Here it is Mara, another demon who wants to destroy the meditation of Gautama. So here we have it's a playground of emotions. You can see, I've just marked them out, Bhibatsa on Mara's face, the vigor and force and the army of the Mara, the retinue. There are some who are in Krodha, that is Raudra, and there is one who is in Bhayanaka. He is actually scared to even come near Buddha. Then you can see the Sringara, which can become very seductive, and that is what is portrayed in the daughters of Mara. But there is total Shanta and peace in the face of Gautama. According to Professor C. Shivaram Murthy, if expression has to be taken as a criterion by which a great art has to be judged, it is here in abundance in these Chola paintings. That is when the earlier paintings were revealed. The next one, please. Here we have various emotions. I have just put the tags here. There is reverence, that is Rajaraja, identified as Rajaraja, but later Nagaswami sir said it is just another devotee. So whatever it is, you can see the the reverence in the eyes of this. Then Raudra in these eyes, and there you can see Bhayanaka in the Asuras and his wife. Then there is Harsha, happiness, in the panel where Sundara Murti is going to be taken. And there is again Bhaya. Then there is concern, which is actually a Vyabhichari Bhava. Unless you knew that, you cannot do the Bhriguti. It is known as Bhriguti, one of the Bhru movement. So he is concerned, and there it's a beautiful sculptural panel. I couldn't resist putting that here because it's a very rare one where Shiva is cajoling Parvati. This is from the Lalitambika temple. Lavanya Yojana is the graceful composition of a painting. It may be any theme but should be capable of reaching one's antakarana instantly. The Shastra lays stress on the fineness and grace of lines, which make the figures stand out against the background. The importance given to minute details can be seen in the treatment of the jewelry. This is the Ajanta painting, you can see, and also in the clothing and leaves of trees, etc. I've just put this one panel in which you can see, in fact, it was the Ajanta painting that gave the three-dimensional effect. For the first time, people could identify that Indian art was at such a high level. From this belongs to about 2nd century pre-Common Era till 2nd century Common Era. The Ajanta paintings abound in Sringara Rasa. We can see amorous couples and also very graceful composition of figures showing mundane daily activities. Like, walking the heroine, that is Naika, is being accompanied by a retinue. It's so very lovely to watch. That is Lavanya Yojana. In the Thanjavur painting, the portrayal of Sundaramurti moving towards Devaloka is a joyous composition. Though it is not available as a whole mural, even its small panels portray the mood. It's it's so beautifully composed. You can see the elephant on which Sundaramurti, the elephant itself seems to be in great joy. It's the way it is moving, even the tassels and all that move with the elephant's movement, and then the apsaras are so beautifully portrayed, and their jewelry also. And here are the Siddhas who are overwhelmed with the achievement of Sundaramurti. Now we come to Sadrishya, which is exact portrayal of the character. This evolved to greater perfection during the later period of the Cholas in sculpture, but the Marathas of Thanjavur excelled in this. Now we have here in the Ajanta period, you can see, identifying what are kinnaras. Kinnaras were supposed to have bird's body. This is a kind of sadrishya. The paintings tell us how they would have looked. Here we have the kinnaras in flight and the kinnara playing a lute. Then we have the Ashwamukhi trying to distract a sage who is in meditation. We have Indra's descent. How was he identified as Indra? Because he's descending from the Devaloka. So the clouds are shown at the back, and he's got a kirita, and his skin color, Gaura, shows that Indra, and there is a Vajra, which we are not able to see very clearly here, and that is a royal lady. So these are the identification of Sadrishya in Ajanta. But let us look at the others. Here we have, I did put, sorry, there's a spelling mistake. Koparan Shingan of Chidambaram is portrayed in sculpture. You can well understand how he would have looked. But the Marathas excelled in creating portrait painting, which are like photographs. In the Thanjavur inner chamber, we have Karuvur Tevar and Rajaraja. That is how it has been identified. That is because of their aharya. So we go on to Varnika Bhanga, which is what enlivens a painting. Color is the life-giving element of painting, and it is this quality that helps us understand the terminology in the text clearly as regards skin tones, dresses, and the various jewelry. Whether it is a necklace of pearl, rubies, or spatika, it would look the same in sculpture. But painting immediately gives us the identification. The Natya Shastra and Vishnu Dharmottara mention 4 primary colors. Shuddha Varna is white, blue, yellow, and red. Many who are learning art in school or college will wonder why, because nowadays the primary colors are identified only as blue, red, and yellow. And Bharata justifies why white. He didn't think that people are going to think differently, but why white is very important, because Shweta cannot be derived by mixing anything. And the Agamas go on to say 5 different kind of Shweta, like the Shank and the Chira and the moon and so forth. And he says if you have to get a lighter tint of any color, for instance Padma Varna, which is so very popular in Indian painting, because Padma is popular and Padma Varna for the Devatas was prescribed. He says that you can get only by mixing red with white. And also to understand the different tones. Now we come to the combining of 2 colors, which is known as Upavarna or secondary colors. Then we have the Sankirna Varna or tertiary colors, where more are mixed. So we need to have all this, and it is the painting that tells us the identification of Gaura and Shama. Can we have the next one? Here you can see she is Gaura, that is the body. It is mentioned that combination of red, yellow and a lot of white and a little bit of blue to give the molding has to be used for Gaura. But these 2 figures you can see are Shama, but slightly different kind of Shama, because he says according to the figure that you are going to do, you have to increase or decrease the Neela. This is only an artist, sensitive artist who were able to do Lokanukarana can do it. So here we should understand, when we say Gaura, nowadays many paintings show Rama as green, because the English translation says Shama is green. And then Krishna is Shama, they say he is blue. But it's not exactly that color. You have to read the Natya Shastra, the Chitra Sutra and the Agamas to understand how we derive these colors. In fact, the Ajanta paintings seem like a visual representation as we see here, and these belong to the Satavahana period from the 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE in the rock cut caves of Western India. Then the next one. An amazing continuity in technique from Ajanta to Thanjavur is the use of groups of figures in varied hues, not only creating aesthetic effects in contrast, but also giving a historical data of people who formed the society. This is we have already seen some of them. You can see how in the Apsara panel, that one Apsara is Gaura and one Apsara is Shama. But she is not dark blue or dark green. It is only an addition of a tint of blue, because blue and yellow will combine to create a greenish tinge. And here is a male performer. He is in deep Gaura, that is reddish, so there is more red added to that. And there you can see all the 3 hues. The beauty of this is it also reveals that the Thanjavur groups can be seen in their Pashva Kuntala, that is the side bun of the women, and Kesha Bandha, the hair is actually tied, knotting it at the side. The men used to knot up their hair like that, and the relevant jewels you can see. As is with all evolution, the later Thanjavur paintings portray sharper lines and brighter colors. The Ajanta artists completely covered the walls, pillars and ceilings of the caves with paintings of plants, animals, Gandharvas, Kinnaras and human figures, portraying them with feeling and beauty. This is the ceiling of cave number 17, which from the entrance it is full of paintings. We can see this also as a continuing feature in the later sculptural temples, only evolving to the extent of using certain relevant Deshi elements. So the lotus becomes more pictorial and stylized. The wall is coated with clay mixed with rice husk and gum and then primed with a coat of lime, carefully smoothened and polished. The outlines are drawn with dark brown or black and filled with the primary and the secondary colors. Effects of light and shade and highlights are achieved with streaks and dots. We can see that in this crowd. Bharata calls this as Bitti Lepanam. Bitti means wall, Lepanam means covering it with some kind of a clay. So this is described in chapter 2, where he says even the playhouse, that is building of the theatre, the walls should be covered with Bitti Lepanam and painted with figures of men and women. This same method we can see in the structural temples in our country. It is interesting to understand that the final lime plaster layer can hold the painting like a canvas that could be removed intact and mounted on another surface by proper scientific methods, as seen in the walls of the Thanjavur temple. We have just gone through it. But with so many years of study in paintings and the research that's going on, I'm tempted to believe that the Thanjavur painters, the earlier Thanjavur painters, used an indigenous buono fresco method. Now, in fresco, we have the wet fresco called the buono fresco and secco fresco called the dry fresco. All Indian paintings have been brought under secco fresco, where the lime plaster, final lime plaster, is allowed to dry, outlines drawn and filled. This has its own effect, and that is what we can see in the Nayak painting. It doesn't crack, it just comes off. It peels, and so you can remove it. But the buono fresco, as we can see in the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo painting, I was amazed to see, the deep cracks that are there in that Sistine Chapel. And if you notice, there are cracks in the panels. The IGNCA has created several panels. Please take the trouble to read, because you cannot see them. Nowadays, we are not allowed to go into the passage. The artificial light spoils it, and so they have taken the trouble to create panels where you can see the painting, but there are deep cracks, which means that must have been an indigenous buono or the fresh fresco technique. That is why it is still retained. It did not peel off along with the Nayak painting. It's a very interesting area of study. I would like to particularly mention here that dance was very popular art in practice and very popular theme for sculpture and painting. The evolution of its costumes and jewels are brought out beautifully through these paintings. Here is an interesting development shown. The bark caves, you can see bark caves and Ajanta caves. There are single dancers in a full sleeve tunic like the present Kathak dance. But there is a veil on her head, and the Ajanta artist has got a mauli. Mauli is a half crown placed at the line of the hair, and the hairdo is very different. Then we have the next one, please. In Thanjavur, nothing to beat the beauty of this. This painting looks like sculpture, because it was, all scholars have said, the South Indian bronzes had reached the zenith of its beauty in the Thanjavur, in the Chola dynasty. And this Udvrita, you can see, is so beautifully painted, you can almost feel the twisting of the body. It's like a sculpture. And here the costume is very, very, discreetly drawn with only lines, because they were very particular about the proportion to be seen, not covered with clothes. Then we can see these two are very interesting panels which are there. In the morning we had gone for the function that is in that mandapa which is in front of the Subramanya temple. These are all the Maratha period paintings, where you can see one dancer with a sari tied almost like the contemporary, the present Bharatanatyam costume, and the Talesaman is almost as we use now, though there is a Udbata Kuntala, and the Aropya Skandamala, that is, like an Upavitam, is thrown across the shoulder for this, and you can see in that like a Kathak dancer, the tunic and the salwar And you can see the hairdo is like the South Indian style. So there must have been an intermingling as we saw Priyadarshini's presentation of Manipravalam, if we can call it, with the mixing of all languages. That shows that, there was a meeting, everything was a meeting point, a melting point. That is, melting bhumi of culture is India. In conclusion, the Shastra wants us to remember auchitya, the appropriate expression of a theme, which marks its superior quality. The painters took special care to adhere to the basic principles, realizing that he had the capacity to highlight the good and ignore the faults, to portray a world conducive to auspiciousness and well-being in his paintings. This is a saying from Chitra Sutra about auchitya. Thank you very much. Dhanyavada.
From everyone, all scholars who are doing presentations today, we have plenty to learn, and that was a wonderful presentation about Ajanta and Thanjavur paintings. I would like Jayashree Akka's Guru, Dr. Padma Subramaniam, Srimati R. Kausalya ma'am, to come and felicitate Jayashree Akka, please.
Oh, thank you, ma.
Next, we will have a presentation by Kalaimamani, Dr. M.S. Sarala. She is a student of Guru T.K. Rajalakshmi and Guru K.J. Sarasa, and also Padma Bhushan Dr. Padma Subramaniam. She has learnt Kuchipudi under Srimati Vasanta Lakshmi Narasimhachari. She has also been teaching in many universities. She has many titles and awards to her credit, including Kalai Mamani and Natana Shironmani. Her presentations, there are plenty of presentations, I'll mention only a few here. Shilambil Padinoru Adal, Kamba Ramayanam, and Karaikal Ammayar. She has also authored many books. Today, she will be presenting on the topic some important references to dance technique in classical Tamil literature.